My beloved child, there are moments in life that seem ordinary when they happen, yet they carry a weight so powerful that their impact continues long after the words have been spoken. Today, I want you to understand something that many people never realize. A single sentence, spoken from a sincere heart, can travel farther than you imagine. It can reach places you cannot see. It can touch people you never expected. And sometimes, it can leave someone completely stunned. Not because your words were loud. Not because they were dramatic. But because they were true. Someone recently heard something you said. Perhaps you thought it was just another conversation. Perhaps you believed those words would fade away like countless others before them. Yet those words remained. They echoed in the mind of someone who could not stop thinking about them. While you moved on with your day, they found themselves returning to that moment again and again. There was something different about what you said. Something unforgettable. Something that carried a deeper meaning than even you realized. As you listen, keep your heart open because this message may explain events that have felt confusing. It may reveal why certain energies around you seem to be shifting. It may help you understand why some people suddenly look at you differently than before. The truth is that many people speak simply to be heard. But you spoke from a place that was genuine. And authenticity has a power that cannot be ignored. The person who heard your words expected something ordinary. They expected the usual conversation. They expected familiar thoughts and predictable ideas. Yet what they received was something entirely different. What they heard challenged assumptions they had carried for a very long time. That moment stopped them. Not physically. Not dramatically. But internally. For a brief moment, everything became quiet. They began questioning things they had accepted as facts. They began seeing situations from a new perspective. And most importantly, they began seeing you differently. You may not know who this person is. You may not even realize the effect you had. But your words became a mirror. And in that mirror, they saw something they were not expecting to see. Sometimes people spend years searching for answers while overlooking the truth standing right in front of them. Sometimes they become so accustomed to noise that they forget what honesty sounds like. Then one day, a simple voice speaks with clarity, and suddenly everything changes. That is the kind of moment we are talking about. The kind of moment that cannot be planned. The kind of moment that cannot be manufactured. The kind of moment that arrives unexpectedly and leaves a permanent impression. There is a reason this matters. There is a reason you are hearing this message today. Because the impact of your words did not end with that conversation. It continued. The person who heard you began reflecting on things they had ignored. Memories resurfaced. Questions appeared. Certain choices no longer felt as certain as before. What once seemed obvious suddenly required deeper thought. And all because of a few honest words. Think about that. In a world filled with endless opinions, endless distractions, and endless noise, sincerity still possesses extraordinary power. Many underestimate this. Many assume that only grand actions create meaningful change. Yet history has shown repeatedly that a single sentence can alter a perspective. A single conversation can inspire a new direction. A single truth can awaken something that has been asleep for years. The person who listened to you experienced exactly that. What surprised them most was not merely what you said. It was the confidence behind it. The calm certainty. The absence of pretense. You were not trying to impress anyone. You were not trying to gain approval. You were simply expressing what was real to you. And authenticity is rare. When people encounter something rare, they remember it. Long after the conversation ended, they remembered your words. Long after the details should have faded, they remained. Long after they expected to move on, they found themselves returning to that moment. Why? Because truth has a way of staying. Truth does not disappear when the conversation ends. Truth follows people. Truth lingers. Truth waits patiently until it is understood. What makes this even more remarkable is that you may have spoken those words during an ordinary day. There may have been no audience. No special setting. No indication that anything significant was taking place. Yet significance does not always announce itself. Often it arrives quietly. Often it hides inside simple moments. Often it reveals itself only later. And that is exactly what happened here. Someone is still thinking about what you said. Someone is still trying to understand why those words affected them so deeply. Someone is still wondering why they cannot forget that moment. As this story continues, you will discover that the reaction was far greater than anyone expected. What began as a simple conversation became the beginning of something much larger. The effects are still unfolding, and the next part of this journey reveals details that make the entire situation even more astonishing. For now, remember this. Never underestimate the power of your voice. Never underestimate the value of honesty. Never underestimate the influence of a sincere heart. Because somewhere, someone heard your words, and what they heard left them completely stunned. And this is only the beginning. A remarkable truth is beginning to unfold, and what happened next was even more surprising than the conversation itself. The person who heard your words tried to continue with their day as if nothing had happened. They told themselves it was just a passing moment. They convinced themselves that they would forget it soon. Yet the more they tried to move on, the more those words returned to their mind. There was something hidden inside your message that they could not ignore. Every time they remembered your voice, they felt the same unexpected feeling. It was not confusion. It was not uncertainty. It was recognition. Deep inside, they knew they had heard something important. Days passed. The world continued moving. People continued speaking. Life continued unfolding. But your words remained. Imagine that for a moment. Out of all the conversations they experienced, out of all the voices they heard, out of all the opinions surrounding them, yours was the one they could not forget. That realization surprised them. In fact, it surprised them more than anyone could have imagined. Because they began noticing something unusual. The advice they once followed no longer felt complete. The assumptions they once trusted no longer felt certain. The path they once believed was fixed suddenly seemed open to new possibilities. And every road led back to one memory. One conversation. One moment. One voice. Your voice. The more they reflected on what happened, the more they realized that your words had revealed something they had been unable to see on their own. Sometimes people search everywhere for clarity while overlooking the wisdom standing right beside them. Then one day a simple truth arrives and changes everything. That is exactly what happened. What shocked them was not the complexity of your message. It was its simplicity. Simple truths are often the most powerful truths. Simple truths are the ones that stay. Simple truths are the ones that transform lives. And your words carried exactly that kind of power. There was no attempt to impress. There was no effort to persuade. There was only honesty. And honesty carries a strength that cannot be copied. As the days continued, they began replaying the conversation from beginning to end. They remembered the tone. They remembered the timing. They remembered the feeling they experienced when those words first reached them. And every time they replayed it, they discovered something new. A new meaning. A new insight. A new understanding. It felt almost impossible. How could one conversation continue revealing deeper layers? How could one moment continue growing in significance? The answer was simple. Because truth unfolds over time. Not everyone understands a message the first time they hear it. Sometimes understanding arrives gradually. Sometimes realization appears piece by piece. Sometimes the full meaning only becomes clear when enough time has passed. That process had already begun. And the results were extraordinary. The person who heard you started looking at situations differently. They started paying attention to details they had ignored. They started noticing patterns they had never recognized before. Most importantly, they started noticing you. Not in the way they once had. Not through old assumptions. Not through outdated impressions. They began seeing you through a completely different lens. A clearer lens. A more honest lens. A more accurate lens. And what they saw surprised them. For a long time they believed they understood who you were. For a long time they assumed they had you figured out. For a long time they felt confident in their conclusions. Then your words shattered those conclusions. Suddenly they realized there was far more depth to you than they had ever recognized. Far more wisdom. Far more strength. Far more authenticity. That discovery left a lasting impression. Because genuine character cannot remain hidden forever. Eventually it reveals itself. Eventually people notice. Eventually people understand. And when that moment arrives, it often changes everything. The fascinating part is that you may still have no idea any of this is happening. You may still believe that conversation was ordinary. You may still think your words disappeared into the air. But they did not disappear. They landed exactly where they needed to land. They reached exactly who needed to hear them. And now the effects continue spreading. The person who heard you has entered a period of reflection unlike anything they expected. Questions are emerging. Perspectives are shifting. Possibilities are opening. And the deeper they think about it, the more powerful your words become. There is a reason this story continues to grow. There is a reason the impact keeps expanding. Because certain moments are larger than they first appear. Certain conversations carry a purpose that only becomes visible later. Certain words arrive at exactly the right time. This was one of those moments. This was one of those conversations. This was one of those truths. And the most astonishing part has not even happened yet. What is coming next will reveal why this reaction became so unforgettable. It will explain why the memory of your words continues growing stronger instead of fading away. It will show how a single moment created consequences nobody could have predicted. The story is still unfolding. The realization is still deepening. The impact is still growing. And what happens next may become the most surprising chapter of all. Because someone was stunned after listening to what you said. But they are only beginning to understand why. A quiet shift was taking place behind the scenes, and almost nobody could see it. While the world continued moving at its usual pace, while routines remained unchanged and ordinary days came and went, the person who heard your words was experiencing something they could not easily explain. At first, they tried to dismiss it. They told themselves they were overthinking. They told themselves it was only a conversation. They told themselves it would pass. Yet it did not pass. Instead, it grew stronger. Every day seemed to bring a new realization. Every reflection uncovered another layer. Every memory of that moment felt more meaningful than before. What made this so unusual was that your words were not designed to create this effect. They were not carefully planned. They were not part of some grand performance. They came naturally. They came honestly. They came from a place that asked for nothing in return. And perhaps that is exactly why they carried such power. There is something unforgettable about sincerity. People encounter opinions every day. They encounter predictions every day. They encounter promises every day. But genuine honesty is rare. When someone encounters it, they remember. The person who heard you certainly remembered. In fact, they reached a point where they could no longer ignore the impact your words had created. Something inside them had awakened. A perspective they never considered before had begun demanding attention. And that perspective changed everything. Suddenly, they started reviewing moments from the past. Conversations they once overlooked now seemed important. Details they once ignored now appeared significant. Memories they once dismissed now carried new meaning. It was as though your words had handed them a key. A key that unlocked a deeper understanding of situations they thought they already understood. And what they discovered surprised them. Because the more they reflected, the more they realized that many of their previous assumptions had been incomplete. Not entirely wrong. Just incomplete. They had seen only part of the picture. Your words revealed the rest. That realization brought a mixture of emotions. Wonder. Respect. Curiosity. And above all, appreciation. Appreciation for the clarity they had received. Appreciation for the perspective they had gained. Appreciation for the truth they could no longer ignore. The remarkable thing is that this transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded slowly. Like sunrise replacing darkness one ray at a time. Each realization built upon the previous one. Each insight created room for another. Each moment of understanding led to a deeper level of awareness. And through it all, one thought continued returning. You. Not because of what you possessed. Not because of what you achieved. Not because of what others said about you. But because of what you revealed through your words. The more they thought about it, the clearer it became. There was a depth within you they had never fully recognized. A quiet strength. A steady wisdom. A rare authenticity. These qualities had always existed. The difference was that now they could finally see them. Sometimes people do not recognize value until they encounter undeniable evidence of it. Sometimes they overlook extraordinary qualities because those qualities are expressed with humility. Sometimes they need a moment of clarity before they truly understand what has been in front of them all along. That moment had finally arrived. And it changed their perspective completely. What happened next was even more surprising. The person who heard your words began paying attention in a way they never had before. They listened more carefully. They observed more closely. They reflected more deeply. Every observation seemed to confirm the same conclusion. Your words had not been an accident. Your insight had not been a coincidence. Your perspective had come from a place of genuine understanding. That realization carried enormous weight. Because genuine understanding cannot be faked. It reveals itself naturally. It reveals itself consistently. And once people recognize it, they rarely forget it. As this process continued, something unexpected began happening. The admiration they felt continued growing. Not because they were trying to admire you. Not because they intended to change their opinion. But because every reflection led them to the same destination. Respect. A deeper respect than they had before. A stronger appreciation than they expected. A clearer recognition of qualities they once overlooked. And that recognition became impossible to ignore. Imagine discovering that someone you thought you understood possesses far more depth than you realized. Imagine discovering hidden strengths where you once saw ordinary traits. Imagine realizing that a single conversation has completely transformed your perspective. That is exactly what they experienced. The journey was surprising. The realization was powerful. And the impact was lasting. Yet there is another layer to this story. A layer that makes everything even more extraordinary. Because while they were learning these lessons, another realization was beginning to emerge. A realization connected directly to the future. Not the past. Not old memories. Not previous assumptions. The future. They started wondering what else they might discover. What other truths had they overlooked? What other insights remained hidden? What other conversations might reveal even greater understanding? Those questions created a sense of anticipation. A sense that the story was not finished. A sense that something meaningful was still approaching. And they were right. Because the most significant realization had not yet arrived. The most memorable moment was still ahead. The most surprising discovery was waiting just beyond the horizon. Everything up to this point had been preparation. every reflection, every realization, every moment of understanding. All of it was leading towards something larger. Something that would connect every piece of the puzzle. Something that would explain why this single conversation became impossible to forget. The person who heard your words thought they had already reached the conclusion. They believed they understood the lesson. They believed they had discovered the full meaning. But they were mistaken. The deepest realization was still coming. And when it arrived, it would change the way they viewed that moment forever. Because someone was stunned after listening to what you said. Then they became curious. Then they became reflective. Then they became aware. And soon, they would discover a truth so meaningful that it would connect everything they had been experiencing from the very beginning. That moment is closer than they realize. And it is closer than you realize as well. An extraordinary realization was finally beginning to take shape, and the person who heard your words could no longer deny what was happening. Every question they had been asking, every memory they had been examining, and every thought they had been revisiting was slowly leading them toward one undeniable conclusion. Your words had arrived at exactly the right moment. Not too early. Not too late. Exactly when they were needed. That understanding changed everything. Suddenly, all the reflections of the previous days started connecting together. Pieces that once seemed unrelated now formed a clear picture. The confusion disappeared. The uncertainty faded. The deeper meaning finally revealed itself. And when it did, they were left completely amazed. Because they realized something they had never expected to realize. The conversation was never only about the words. It was about the timing. It was about the perspective. It was about the truth hidden inside those simple sentences. The more they thought about it, the more extraordinary it seemed. Out of all the possible conversations. Out of all the possible moments. Out of all the possible voices. Yours was the one that stayed. Yours was the one that returned to their mind. Yours was the one that continued creating new understanding long after everything else had faded. That realization carried enormous significance. Because most conversations disappear. Most opinions are forgotten. Most words lose their impact over time. But some words grow stronger. Some words become more meaningful with every passing day. Some words refuse to be forgotten. And yours belonged to that rare category. The person who heard you finally stopped asking why they could not forget the conversation. Instead, they began asking a completely different question. What was this experience trying to teach them? That question changed everything. Because once they started looking for lessons instead of explanations, new insights appeared everywhere. They discovered wisdom in places they had overlooked. They discovered meaning in details they had ignored. They discovered opportunities for growth that had been hidden in plain sight. And every discovery traced back to the same beginning. The moment they heard your words. That is when another realization arrived. A realization that surprised them even more than the first. They understood that your influence extended far beyond that single conversation. The impact was not limited to one day. The effect was not limited to one moment. The influence continued moving forward. Quietly. steadily, powerfully, like ripples spreading across water long after a stone has touched the surface. The conversation had become a starting point, a turning point, a reference point they would continue remembering for a very long time. What amazed them most was how natural everything had felt at the time. Nothing appeared unusual. Nothing appeared dramatic. Nothing appeared extraordinary. Yet now, looking back, they could see how significant that moment truly was. And that realization filled them with appreciation. Appreciation for honesty. Appreciation for authenticity. Appreciation for the rare ability to speak from the heart. These qualities are more valuable than many people realize. In a world filled with distractions, genuine sincerity stands out. In a world filled with noise, clear truth becomes unforgettable. In a world filled with assumptions, authenticity becomes remarkable. That is why your words remained. That is why your message continued growing stronger. That is why the memory refused to disappear. As their understanding deepened, they also began seeing themselves differently. This may be the most important part of the entire story. Because your words did not only change how they viewed you. Your words changed how they viewed themselves. They began questioning old limitations. They began challenging old beliefs. They began exploring possibilities they once ignored. And each step forward brought a greater sense of clarity. Imagine realizing that a single conversation has quietly improved the way you understand your own life. Imagine recognizing that a simple exchange of words has opened new doors in your thinking. Imagine discovering that a brief moment has created lasting value. That is exactly what happened. The transformation was subtle. But it was real. The influence was quiet. But it was powerful. The lesson was simple. But it was unforgettable. And then came the realization that connected everything together. The person who heard your words finally understood why they had been so stunned in the first place. It was not because your message was shocking. It was not because your message was unexpected. It was because your message felt true. Truth has a unique quality. People recognize it. Even when they are not looking for it. Even when they are not expecting it. Even when they are not prepared for it. Truth reaches places that ordinary words cannot reach. And once it arrives, it becomes difficult to ignore. That is exactly what happened here. The truth inside your words reached a place deep within their understanding. And once it arrived, everything started changing. The fascinating thing is that this story still is not finished. The journey is still continuing. The lessons are still unfolding. The impact is still growing. Because some conversations do not end when the words stop. Some conversations continue inside people's minds. Some conversations continue shaping decisions. Some conversations continue creating understanding for months and even years afterward. This is one of those conversations. This is one of those moments. This is one of those memories. And now the person who heard you carries something they did not possess before. A new perspective. A deeper awareness. A stronger appreciation for authenticity. All because of a conversation they never expected to remember. As the story moves toward its final chapter, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Someone was stunned after listening to what you said. Then they reflected. Then they learned. Then they changed. And now they understand that some words are far more powerful than they appear in the moment they are spoken. The final piece of this story is still waiting. And when that final realization arrives, it will reveal why this unforgettable moment was destined to leave such a lasting impression from the very beginning.